This podcast is sponsored by A. Miller George Funeral Home, where each life is celebrated, and their sister company, Cremation London and Middlesex, both family-owned and operated. By Hyde Park Care Pharmacy. Experience the difference an independent pharmacy can make for you and your loved ones. Hyde Park Care Pharmacy offers personalized care, short wait time, very competitive pricing, easy transfer of your prescription, and much more. And by Molly Maid. During these times of COVID-19, it has never been more important to keep your family safe. With the Healthy Home Cleaning System, Molly Maid London is here to help. Make your home a healthy haven. Call Molly Maid London today. Today, we open Season 5 with a panel discussion about the crisis in Afghanistan. We welcome Canadian war vet Michael Akpada, along with Saboor Khan, local Afghanistan Canadian, who is the local leader of the Muslim Association of Canada, and Tayiba Nasr, president of London's Afghan Socio-Cultural Association.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever and wherever you may be. We welcome you to Season 5 of the Vickers Crossing podcast. The Vickers Crossing is a virtual space where faith intersects with the public square. And yes, it is Season 5, and we are back. My name is Rob Henderson, and I serve as the priest at Holy Trinity St. Stephen's Memorial Anglican Church.
How are you, everybody? My name is Kevin George. I'm the priest and rector at St. Aidan's Church, and I'm joined here by another guy I know.
And my name is Ian. I'm a producer, singer-songwriter, editor of The Vickers Crossing.
All right, guys. Well, it's good to see you. I haven't seen you for a little while, and it's been,
forever.
Say, we're 5 seasons now. Where's the time gone, right?
I know,
like,
right?
But when we started,
Wow.
Ian didn't have any whiskers on his chin. Now look at him.
He's
I
overgrown.
can see 2 or 3 right now with my camera. So, so we're excited about Season 5.
Yeah, that's exciting, and I feel like it's a Netflix thing, right? Like because we take breaks in the summer and in the winter.
Mhm.
Sometimes we can do a couple seasons a year. So 5 seasons. Well, how long have we been around? What series is
That's
this? You know, what year are you on? You know, it's pretty good.
No, it's great. So we're glad to be back, and we got a special kind of episode to kick things off. In Season 5 today, we will be highlighting some of our upcoming guests. Of course, we got a great list to tell you about over the next couple of months that'll be joining us. And then we're going to do something a little different. We have a panel discussion today about a story that's on everybody's minds and hearts, and that is the crisis in Afghanistan right now. And we'll be welcoming in 3 wonderful guests who we'll introduce in just a little bit. So we're looking forward to that. But first, Kevin, would you do our land acknowledgement, please?
Yes, by all means. The Vickers Crossing acknowledges that our podcast is recorded on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Lenaweapak peoples and the Attawandaron peoples, on lands connected with the London Township and Somber Treaties and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant wampum. This land continues to be diverse, home to diverse Indigenous peoples, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land and vital contributors to our society. And we continue to work along with others in the church towards a greater sense of reconciliation between all peoples.
Good, thank you. And again, we want to thank our sponsors to the Vickers Crossing, who've been, so wonderful with us over these past few seasons, and we're happy to have them back. To A. Miller George Funeral Home, where each life is celebrated, and their sister company, Cremation London Middlesex, both family owned and operated. Many thanks to our good friend Dave Mullen and the whole staff out at A. Miller George today.
Yeah, I was out at Canadian Tire, and I was walking up to the cash, and I had like a pick in my hands, like, for digging the ground. And I hear this guy behind me asking if I'm gonna hurt somebody with that, and I turn around, it's Dave Mullen. So I don't know if he thought I was gonna try and increase his business or what. But anyway, I said, no, just get a little digging to do, buddy. Just relax, okay? Stay calm. But he was headed off for some good vacation, and I hope he got good rest. Dave and the crew are good to us. So we send out our love as well to Hyde Park Care Pharmacy, locally owned, locally operated, locally loved. And we'd be remiss if we didn't offer our congratulations to Carol on the birth of Daniela. Congratulations. She's a beautiful little girl. And so Carol's on some maternity leave right now. Soon to be back in the fall to the pharmacy, but you can get on over there and have all your needs, your pharmacy needs met by Jin, who's one of the pharmacists, or by Miriam. Both of them are incredible. They continue to keep this fine specimen working. So we highly recommend Hyde Park Care Pharmacy.
And last, but certainly not least, you want to say a huge thank you to Molly Maid. Make your home a healthy haven. Call Molly Maid London today. Trisha Lister hooked us up with that one. They come in, they do a fantastic job. They get out and it's spotless, it's clean, it smells fresh, it's wonderful. So you need some cleaning.
Call
Molly Maid.
Molly Maid.
Like a fresh spring day. After
Absolutely.
Molly Maid finishes up in there. All right, good. Yes, thank you very much to all our sponsors, and we look forward to having you with us for season number 5. We got a couple of minutes, guys, before our guests get here. So you want to just quickly check in and want to play What Did You Do on Your Summer Vacation? That's
let's do that. That's a
neat
good game.
Sure.
Okay. So Ian, you go first.
Well, if I sound different, it's because I'm battling some Invisalign. You can't see, which is great, but this is news to Kevin and Rob. But
is this like COVID Invisalign? Is that?
No, they're like braces but invisible.
Look at that. Yeah.
So if I sound a little bit lispy, it's because I have plastic over my teeth.
Oh my gosh!
Right there, you can see.
Did you have braces before you went away on holidays?
No, I've never had like braces. I used to make fun of my brothers for like, because they had Invisalign and braces, and I was like, I have perfect teeth. And then Karma said, how about this?
That's right. So you said it out loud, didn't you?
Yeah.
Well, good. I'm glad you didn't, because I was thinking, I've known this guy for like 3 years. I didn't even notice.
I never saw braces on him. You?
What's he talking about? So okay, so that was a fun event in your summer life. Good. Good.
Yeah.
Kevin, what about you? Anything exciting?
Well, we've had lots of excitement. Too much excitement, Rob. We did take a little bit of a break. The first little break we took, we went up to Toronto, was after Catherine Ann came off of a broken ankle after 8 weeks in a boot. And we came back from that, and she had a detached retina. So then we spent the better part of, we had 10 days of her lying on her face for 55 minutes out of every hour. So then we did, so I was busy doing drops, 4 times a day, and trying to feed her as she was lying down. And, it was all very exciting. So when she got over that, we took a little trip to Huntsville for a few days. And then the last little bit, we went out to Norwich. There's some great new breweries out there. I'd encourage folks anywhere near Norwich or Oxford counties to go to Flux. Flux is one of them, a beautiful little brewery right on this little pond. Go check it out.
Nice.
So we just did the local thing, went to some fresh cut fry shacks and that sort of stuff.
Oh, nice. Good.
Other than that, sitting in my backyard, growing vegetables, listening to music, cutting grass, doing that stuff, trying to stay out of trouble. What about you, buddy?
I'm glad you gave a little love to Norwich, because my wife's mom's from there.
Okay.
Grew up on a farm and still has family there. And
she Dutch by chance?
No.
Because there's
I
was astonished at the amount of Dutch up there.
Oh, okay, really? Yeah. We go up there for occasional family, barbecues and Christmas parties and such, but not in the last 2 years. But
incredible bakery, Rob, right on the main street there.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, very much so. Yeah, we did some downtime, some quiet time. Yeah, so we spent a little time up in Saboor Beach for a couple of days, which was nice. It's a nice area up there, and
like that.
Toured the towns of Southampton and Saboor Beach and spent some time on the beach, and nice dinners outside. They had a lot of the restaurants open outside, which was really nice. And we had a bit of a, it's a small world when you travel stories. And we were staying at a bed and breakfast. And the couple that we met in the morning, having breakfast with us as we got chatting, they asked, what we did and everything. And I told them what I did and where I was a priest. And the guy says, "Oh, I got baptized there."
Come on.
And And then the next morning, we met a family, came down with mom and dad and a young boy, and got chatting with them. And I said to him, "Where are you guys from?" He says, "Windsor."
Oh.
And I said, "Oh, no kidding. What do you do?" He goes, "I'm a teacher in Essex."
Oh.
And I say, "Oh my gosh, do you know Christian Paulton?"
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I know
buddy
him
Christian.
I know really well.
Yeah.
And so we got talking about that, and there were connections, and
cool.
They knew him and other people. So you don't have to travel too far to run into people that are close to home, right?
That's awesome. Yeah,
it was pretty cool.
Wow.
So that was nice. Yeah, that was good.
Well, that's awesome. Sounds like we all had a good time then, as much as we can. I've saved my Newfoundland trip till November. I'm going to wait till it warms up out there.
Yeah, that's right. Go out there when it's 30 degrees Fahrenheit.
That's right. Yeah.
Perfect. All right, guys. Well, should we invite our guests in here and get this season 5 underway?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's
What do you
let's
say?
bring them in. Good idea.
And welcome back to the Vickers Crossing. Our season 5 kicks off today, and we're really happy to have some wonderful guests to get things going on our 5th season of the Vickers Crossing podcast here today. So we want to take a moment to introduce our guests. We're going to be talking a little bit about Afghanistan, what's been going on there, and some stories around that as well. So Kevin, why don't you start with our first guest today?
I will do. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Tayiba Nasr. Tayiba was born and raised in Herat, Afghanistan. She is a Canadian citizen and has been living in Canada now for 35 years and in London for 25 of those years. She's a mother to 4 children who were born here. She's been active in the Afghan community in London for many years. She's been working for the South London Neighbourhood Resource Centre, which Rob will know about from his parish out in that neighborhood. And as a support worker, she's been doing that now, I think, for about 16 years, Tayiba. She's been involved with the newcomers through resettlement services and a translator with the Cross Cultural Learning Center here in London. She has many relatives back home in Afghanistan, and certainly her heart is there with them now. And so we say welcome to you, Tayiba.
Sorry, I got to unmute myself. Oh, thank you. Good to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for coming.
I have a privilege to introduce Saboor Khan. He has been a proud Londoner for the past 24 years and has his roots in Afghanistan. He finished his undergrad in engineering, subsequently did his master's of business administration, and is currently practicing law after his legal education, which is fantastic. He has also been serving as the chapterhead for the London branch of the Muslim Association of Canada for the past year and loves working with the interfaith community of London. So welcome, Saboor. Nice to have you.
Thank you so much. My pleasure. And thank you for allowing us to join you in this important discussion.
And I want to welcome Mike Ekpata, our third guest today. Mike is originally from Alberta, moved to Ontario, and now lives in LaSalle. And he is a University of Windsor graduate, my alma mater. Go Lancers, public speaker. He's an accomplished community leader, and Mike is currently a counselor in the town of LaSalle. He had a lengthy career in public service that included 21 years with the Windsor Police Service as a senior constable in investigations, and 26 years as a Canadian infantry reservist with the Essex and Kent Scottish. And he was deployed to Afghanistan in 2007. So, Mike, welcome. Glad you're here today.
Absolute privilege to be here. Thank you for hosting, and hello to my other colleagues that we'll be speaking with.
All right. Well, let's get started with, if we can, a bit of a panel situation. If you do want to chime in and we've not gotten to you and you want to say something, unmute yourself and yell at us. We'll get you in there as we can. But let's start with Tayiba and Saboor as Canadians here who have people back home. I think you both have family in Afghanistan right now. Have they found their way to safety? And are they okay? You know, where are they? If it's safe to say so. And let's start with Tayiba and then you, Saboor. Tell us about what's going on with your family back home. Oh, you're on mute there, Tayiba. We just have to get you the.
I thought that I'm muted. Okay. Some of my relatives already, like, they are displaced. They left their homes because they were in danger. They were working for the government, military, and so they're not in their own homes. And some of them are, but they're not as in danger. So they stayed home, but the situation right now, there is no gunfire or anything like that, but there is no freedom, and they're scared what will happen tomorrow.
Right. How about you, Saboor?
Yeah, I think similar story to what Tayiba is saying. My family is kind of spread out. I have relatives in Kabul and Kandahar and Jalalabad, so the southern side of the country. Things are not as from a security perspective, there's not a lot of gunfire, or the war has sort of subsided in those parts at least. But people are uneasy because of the history of the Taliban and what they did last time they were in power, and what will happen this time, especially given that the United States and other forces are pulling out. What will that mean economically? What will that mean in terms of human rights? What will that mean in terms of people being able to have the basic necessities addressed? So there's a lot of unknowns right now, and that's what's really making people uneasy. Now, a few of my family members were able to escape. I have one cousin who was able to make it to the UK. He was working with the, I guess, I'm not sure whether it was the UK sort of soldiers, British soldiers, or in their embassy or some other agency, but he was tied to some British operation there, and so they relocated him. And another of my cousin, they allowed him to go, but not his family. And I know he was like, okay, that's not really much of an option for me, because like, how am I going to leave my family, my wife, my children here, and I am going to go? It's not really an option for me. Some of my family has moved to Pakistan. Now they're trying to find, settlement places after Pakistan, but the UN does not give you refugee status. It doesn't give Afghans refugee status if they're in Pakistan. So it's difficult for them to apply as refugees to come to Canada. For example, the Group of Five sponsorship is not a method available to them. So there's some challenges for them as they're trying to find different options. There are members of my family and relatives who who feel comfortable staying in Afghanistan, and they find it okay and safe. They were not involved with the government, the previous government, or the army, or anything of that sort, and they don't feel there will be any significant difficulties. So there's people across the spectrum.
You've got it. Yeah.
Well, following up on that a little bit, that's, appreciate you sharing that of some family in Afghanistan. But you guys are here too, and your family and community, all really you have to see are, the images that are online and TV. You see that on a daily basis, all the chaos and violence going on. How have you and your families here in Canada been coping? Your community and the support systems that are around you. How are everybody here at home doing?
Everybody is really scared, and worried about their relatives and families back home. And so everyone is hoping that they can bring and sponsor their family and relatives to Canada, but that's really not possible so much, And we get lots of calls and messages. Please help us out. Please do something for us. Please bring us here. And financially, we support them. We support the loss of our relatives because we know there is no jobs right now. Most of them are sitting home. My nieces and some of my nephews and stuff in Herat, they were teachers. So they're just sitting home, or as I mentioned, they were in military and government workers there. But even though the Taliban, they say, come back to your posts, come back to your work, we don't bother you. But they don't believe them because it's probably a trick to get them to work and then, kill them or to put them in jail or something. So they're scared to go back to work.
What about you, Saboor?
Yeah, my mom lives with me, and in the initial days when the matters were progressing and all of a sudden picking speed, it was several nights we just didn't sleep because We didn't know how violent this would turn out to be. Thankfully, there wasn't as much bloodshed. You know, it's unfortunate that they took over with such ease. There wasn't much resistance from ISAF, the US forces and allied forces, or the Afghan army. But at the same time, there wasn't much bloodshed. So I do have some family members, just like Tayiba is saying, they're calling us and they're asking, you know, and we have to kind of be honest here. Even before this development, people were trying to Afghanistan because there are economic hardships in Afghanistan. From the decades upon decades of war, life is hard in Afghanistan. It was hard before this development, and so many of my cousins, young men, they didn't have nothing to do. And I have two cousins who escaped to Belgium. They walked and bussed and trucked and whatever through Iran, Turkey, Serbia, Belgium, eventually they made it to Belgium. And you hear stories of how migrants on the way, you know, get killed. So aside from the security reasons, the economic reason, hardship has always been there. And this current situation is only going to escalate that. It's going to even make it more difficult. So we've had a lot of sort of connections, regular communication with our family, and that's a serious concern for people as well, because if the US is leaving out, so is their financial support for the government and possibly sanctions and other things. The economic security of people has really been jeopardized, and people are trying to at least get one son or one or two members of the family out, and hopefully they will be able to then support the rest of the family in a very difficult economic situation.
I feel like that's a bit of an untold story sometimes with new Canadians too, that a lot of like people don't realize the financial responsibility that a lot of new Canadians take for their family back home. Like I don't think people realize that, you know, there's a lot on you, isn't there, as a family to look after family and friends back in Afghanistan.
I just want to add to that, at the question actually. We have been really angry, like myself, I was really, really angry about the government leaving, you know, and handing the country to Taliban so easily, you know, without resistance or anything. So we were just really angry and worried and terrified.
Yeah.
So.
As far as the economic responsibility goes for our family members back home, it's something like I always ask myself, you know, why me in Canada? I came here when I was 11 years old. I got the best gift there could be, honestly. I got the best education. I didn't have to step on a mine. I didn't have to watch people get killed and suffer extreme poverty and malnutrition and see all that difficulties that decades of war brings. And so the least I can do with a gift like that is, of course, to give my community back here in Canada. I thankfully am very involved in my community, but at the same time, make sure that I don't forget where my roots are, and I have a responsibility there. And I hope this little part is a part of that, raising awareness of their plight, and making sure we don't forget those people.
Yeah.
Well, how about you, Mike? We'll talk more about your tour in Afghanistan in a little bit, but seeing those images must be fairly difficult for you. You've been very vocal about the effects of post-traumatic stress disorder, so PTSD, and many of our Canadian soldiers suffer from physical and mental injuries from their service in the Afghan war. How have you been coping with these images and the news that has come out of Afghanistan?
Well, I think one of the things that's happened is you know where you've been. So I could give you a street corner in any community that you've been to, and you could tell me what's there. During the 4th of July weekend, when Kandahar city fell, I spent a lot of my time on my tour going through Kandahar. So some of the shots that they were showing, I knew exactly where they were. And the sight, the sound, and the smells come back to you. And I describe it this way. Memory is really cool. A little bubble in your brain opens up and you can be transformed right back to that moment in time at that place. I've been on calls with a lot of the colleagues that I fought with, and I say this respectfully, they were young when they were there. I was 38, some of them were 18 and 19. So for me, I fought the Afghan war with some soldiers that were young enough to be my children, just based on straight numbers.
Yeah.
So it has been very, very difficult for me to sit and watch on TV what's going on, to see places I've been, to hear names of places where we were, like Masamgar, Shawali Cotton, places like that fell to the Taliban so quickly. And also to know that when we were there, we met the folks of Afghanistan. We had interpreters, we met doctors, we met nurses, we met female police officers who took a risk to engage in these, what we in the West would call normal, but at the time there, not normal endeavors, because they believed that we were going to be there and that we were going to support them. My heart is broken for that country. Selfishly for myself and the soldiers that I fought with, but more so for the families of the fallen, for the families of the 158 that were killed, and then the numbers, 199 Canadian soldiers that have taken their lives since Afghanistan. Those families, when you listen to the pundits on TV, the first thing they talk about is dollars and trillions and billions, and they don't mention my son, my daughter, my loved one who fell. And that's what's difficult, knowing the struggle to try to find some worth in what we've done over the past years to stabilize a country, when it did fall so quickly, when there was, from a soldier's perspective, notice, when Kandahar fell on 4th of July, I said it's only gonna be a matter of time. I don't understand how people in higher chairs than mine were so unaware as to what the potential to happen was. This is not a, I was right, they're wrong. This is definitely not a finger pointing. This is a, my Lord, so many of my friends did multiple tours, went back there, met the Afghan people. Like I said, the relationship we'd have with our interpreters saved our lives. I don't know if he's there. I don't know if he's in line at the airport. I don't know if his family's out. I don't know if he's one of these folks that's received a Taliban night message to say, we know what you did and we're coming to get you. And the only reason they did that is because we, as the West, made promises to these people in Afghanistan, and I'm disappointed with the outcome. And that's being overtly calm inside.
Yes.
A lot of people trusted us, and I don't know how many other people will trust us again in the future.
Right. So I want to pick up from there, Mike. You no doubt have heard some veterans, US, Canadian, British, whomever, talking about the 20 years that we've been engaged there. But as Saboor and Tayiba can tell you, this goes back decades before that. I mean, the Afghan people have been used by multiple governments for multiple reasons over the years.
Yes.
But in this case, we're hearing from some of the folks. Andrew Fox is a British soldier who this week said, it's like the defining feature of our adult lives has turned out to be pointless. I think that's where we all are, he said this week. On patrols, we'd see little girls and boys running around playing with their kites, and they would talk to us and take a few sweets. They're probably 16 or 17 now. And the thought of those lovely little kids growing up to be adults who only knew a degree of freedom and suddenly being thrown back into oppression is heartbreaking. Do you feel that heartbreak? And I mean, to that question that people are asking, was it worth it? How do you respond to those questions as a Canadian veteran of the Afghan war?
So for me, I'll take them in reverse order. Was it worth it? Yes. That British soldier, much the same way that the British MP, retired Lieutenant Colonel Tuggenhat, stood up in the House and spoke truth to power about what he felt and what we had done as the West. Was it worth it for me? I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about our capabilities. I learned a lot about the next young generation of Canadians, and I learned a lot about compassion and how to care for people. And I know that that might seem a bit bizarre considering that we were war fighting, but there were a lot of people that I shed tears over. And I haven't hugged more men in my life since I've been a soldier. When you see someone from Afghanistan, it is not a handshake. It is a full wrap body hug. So I've learned compassion. I did one tour and it was the cornerstone of my life. I reference everything back to it. Now, when I hear other soldiers shake their head, I stand up high. My country asked me to do something. I'm proud of everything that I did. I'm proud that I brought stability. But his points that you brought up, it crushes me that you've got a number of young Afghans that grew up like 16, 17, or anyone that was there when ISAF got there, grew up in a world where if they were a girl, I looked at the number of police officers that became women, police chiefs, different district chiefs, things of that nature, where they were told you can do anything. And there's a small bracket because some of these people are here to make sure you can. And those are the ones that are going to probably find it substantially harder. If you are a 16-year-old girl who's had plans to go to university or had plans to do something, and all of a sudden now the Taliban is telling you those people who you trusted have left. You can't do it anymore. We're now going to tell you what to do. That is what hardens my heart, is because they put so much faith and trust into us that they were able to taste something that the rest of the world, depending on where you live, of course, has.
Yes.
I wanted that for them. When I saw my first young girl with her face uncovered near the end of my tour, I knew I had made a contribution to her feeling safe enough to do it. We met at some of the orphanages, some of the people who were teaching. They took a leap of faith. And I'm disappointed that we didn't fulfill what we had promised. Every soldier writes a blank check to their government to say, my life for your mission. And it's disappointing that the governments didn't get together, didn't speak to each other. That's becoming quite evident. And that one government decided that we're going to do this, the rest of you, and I say this respectfully, be darned, and let the fallout be what it is. But in a coalition of partners, they certainly didn't act like a partner. And I'm just hoping, as I have some friends that are down on the ground right now in uniform, that they are safe and that we're able to find every single Afghan that had interaction with the Canadians, that believed in what we had to offer, that stood toe to toe with us, and that they and their families and their children get out so we can fulfill part of the promise we made to them by bringing them to a place where they can be safe, so they can join the rest of the Canadian community and live in a peaceful country and contribute. Because one of the things that I found is you give people opportunity, boy, oh boy, will they contribute and make a difference.
That's true.
And I think that what we have done right now is going to turn a number of these young Afghans that come to our countries into forces for change and accountability, because they're able to say, we believed you when we were there. I'm now here. I'm going to take full advantage of what this country is going to give me. I'm going to become a Canadian citizen or not, whatever, express what I can, but I'm going to learn, educate myself, and contribute. And that is a very small saving bit of grace, but I still worry about the children that I saw too. I still worry about the people who used to wave at us and the people who believed in what we were doing. And I hope that after August 31st, that the same old Taliban and some of the things that I saw, even in 07, remnants of what they'd done in the early part of 2000 to their own people, doesn't happen again.
Right.
I hope I'm wrong. And the Taliban has changed, and they understand what the Afghan people want simply by where they are right now. And I hope it doesn't fall. I hope it doesn't slide. And I hope that civil war does not engage, because there's got to be there's forces that are opposed to them. And that country suffered so much. It's time for, the average farmer doesn't care who's in Kabul, in the big chair. He or she just wants his family to be fed, to have some clean water and some food so that they can exist in peace. And if we can get them to that phase, then I'm all for it.
Well, sorry to interrupt you,
No,
Mike. I just let me ask Tayiba and Saboor before we jump on to the next thing. Your response to Mike and his service, is it worth it? Right? Like that, you know what the Canadians Americans about was it worth it?
Go ahead, Saboor, if you want.
You go ahead.
Of course it did. For 20 years, we had the democracy, and people were free to go to school. Women were free to go to work, and girls schools, universities. Even though the Taliban here and there, they suicide bombs and targeted some schools, universities, some journalists. So there was, but still the people had freedom. So it did worth it. And thank you for your service. Thank you so much. But unfortunately, they left everything without finishing it. It's if U.S. could sanction Pakistan, Pakistan is the place for all the Taliban. That's where they get all trained, and that's where their family lives. And so Pakistan are harboring the terrorist group. And if U.S. and other NATO countries could put pressure on Pakistan to not to support Taliban, I think the Taliban would be gone by now. But nobody did anything about that. So,
Saboor?
I definitely think it was worth it, but there were ways that could have made it even more worth it. Their approach of not engaging with the Taliban or making a way of including all the different people in Afghanistan meant that they were fighting the war for 20 years. There were ways, and there's a lot written about this, that certain groups in the country there was a lot of attention given to, and certain people in the country, and Mike's nodding his head, were not given attention to. And so it's a country with a lot of different ethnicities, with a lot of different languages and cultures, and you can't go like often our Western forces have done. They go to a place and perhaps by dividing they can conquer, support the one group against another group. I think perhaps there was a different approach. Certainly, the Western forces needed to be firm in terms of the human rights aspects, in terms of upholding the women's rights, making sure that those things are very clear. But there could have been more of an inclusive approach, which would have made this an even more worth it war. And the Western community would have seen a lot more benefit from it as well, with a developed economy, with a developed country, similar to what we saw in Japan and South Korea, Western countries, and even Germany. Western countries went there, and those are prosperous economies now, which the Western world is very much connected to, and they have long-term ties. It's perhaps not as easy as those countries, but there were opportunities for sure.
Yeah. There certainly are, and I think we'd all agree, there are religious overtones in all this, and they're felt around the world. Unfortunately, there are many that take the events in Afghanistan with the Taliban, with ISIS and Syria, etc., to paint a real grim picture of Islam. And it's not uncommon to see misinformation circulating on social media about what will happen. We've heard that about, when Muslims reach a critical mass of people here in Canada, and it's been very harmful. And as we've learned right here in London, as we all know, just a couple of months ago, Islamophobia is a deadly threat to our communities, and it's been top of mind. I'm wondering, Saboor, maybe to you first, can you speak of maybe the impact that these events are having on the Muslim community here in London and beyond, of course, if you want to go past that?
Absolutely. I was a very close family friend of the Afzal family. You guys may recall on June 6th, they were plowed down on Hyde Park Road, close to, I believe, South Carriage Drive. It was a family going on their regular walk, just as me, my mom, my child, my wife go, and they were plowed down. And we have seen with that, and prior to that, with the Quebec mosque shootings and other incidents, how certain people hijack this religion, and people and the media only speak and expose that side of it, and let them dictate what this religion and these people are. And that's extremely unfair and extremely dangerous. We have seen incidences like this, spike Islamophobic attitudes and even incidents. And so I think we have to speak with a level of maturity and make sure we're able to see that what a group like ISIS may say about Islam, or what a group like Al Qaeda or Taliban may say about Islam, it's not the Islam for everyone. That's even if you can see that it's not the Islam for everyone in Afghanistan, so how can it be Islam for everyone around the world? And the other thing that I would like to add, I think, for our Muslim community here and for our Canadian community here, is any type of extremism is not good. It's not healthy.
Right.
And when we're forcing other people to do something, and when we're trying to impose our ideas and beliefs on other people, that's not the way. I remember my constitutional class. We were looking at the Harper Bill against barbaric practices, which was mainly targeting the Muslim community and the women who choose to wear the niqab. Now, that's their choice. Why is it our business what people wear? Just as we cannot accept the Taliban forcing, women to wear a certain dress, we shouldn't accept people forcing not to wear a certain dress, whether it's in France or in Quebec, for example, with the banning of religious symbols. If it's out of their choice, that's their choice. Why is it our business to go and frankly speaking, extreme religious extremism and secular extremism is from the same fabric. It's a lack of tolerance. It's a lack of understanding that other people have a right to their belief, a right to their choice, and we should respect that. We unfortunately have caused a lot of injustices when we have not done that, whether it's with our own Indigenous brothers and sisters here in Canada, or whether it's other parts of the world. And so that's an important aspect as well, understanding that, so long as it's somebody's choice and they're doing it out of their will and it's not harming you, then let them be. It's not our business. And secondly, we have to understand that because one group of a particular faith, is doing something, we cannot go and label the entire group a certain way.
Yeah. I just think about that. I don't know if Tayiba, if you want to follow up on that, or Mike, anything you saw in Afghanistan?
So from my perspective, so I went with 2nd Battalion Royal Canadian Regiment, an East Coast regiment, when I deployed. One of the neat things about my deployment there was very few Black soldiers. Not for any other reason, just because that's the breakdown of the battalion. So I had a different view. I had a view of, again, I following on his comments, that rights denied to anyone can be denied to me. So very simply put, whatever your concept of Canadian is, my family's been here for a number of years. I'm first generation Canadian born here. I don't know if certain people would look at me and go, that's what Canadian looks like. So, which is fine. And that's fine. But because of that, maybe I've become more sensitive to how people are treated. And as the gentleman who just finished speaking has said, those who come here, or those who look different or who behave differently, but want to do something that's their own, we leave them alone. Let them do it. They're not hurting anybody. It's part of their practices. And I simply believe this, that rights denied for one are rights denied for all. And when we start to talk about what I've seen happen as far as worldwide with this, and his point was beautiful, is that you've got Muslims in Afghanistan that overtly disagree with the Taliban's interpretation of Islam.
Right.
That should be a headline on every newspaper around the world.
Right.
So when people start to say those people are they, there's enough of people of goodwill who still pray the same way, who are saying your interpretation does not align with ours, and we don't want it. His comments were very powerful and very important. And right off the bat, what he's done is he said, the people who believe what I believe, or the people who believe this, the extremes of anything are not good. The extreme Toronto Maple Leafs fan is not good. The extreme
or any Toronto Maple Leafs fan, if I could say.
But you know what I mean? Anything to the extreme isn't good. And I say that in a lighthearted, obviously lighthearted, but his point really sticks with me, that you've got a Muslim country where there's Muslim people who do not want the Taliban type of rule. I've watched on TV, and again, Lord love these reporters that are taking the risks. One of the things that really struck me was there was a hair salon in Kabul that was doing women's hair, had pictures of women on the windows, and once the Taliban came through, the owner went outside and tore it all down. Which again, having been there and having seen it, that's the positive change that we had left. And even now, to the point that women's hair salon is closed and those pictures have ripped down, it's an abject failure in the West supporting Afghanistan, but more deeply, it's an abject failure in the understanding of the people of Afghanistan. Because soldiers held ground. Soldiers held and took ground. Politicians are the ones that have orchestrated where we are right now. And I'm not pointing my finger at anyone or any party or any government, but that's why coalition soldiers are so hurt, deeply hurt, because we took and held the ground and gave these folks back their country, not in a paternalistic sense, not in any type of sense like that, but in a, you know what, you folks deserve the right to live in peace. Let us give you some peace. Here you go. Good luck. And what happened under the cover of darkness when they left Bagram is that this started to fall apart. The Brits in their house basically said, we thought we were a bit of a partnership. They never told us anything. The Canadians are scrambling to get people out. I saw Germans there on TV and Dutch. Yeah. Every Western country is scrambling. Collectively, just from the side of the West, it doesn't look like we were very good partners to each other. How good of partners were we to the Afghan people?
Even worse, yeah. So picking up on that, I guess, is where I want to go next. Many Afghans who worked as interpreters for Western military forces and news agencies, easy for you to say, Kevin, are now hiding. They're terrified, and they and their families could be targeted by the Taliban. They're quite concerned about that, as Saboor pointed out earlier. Other vulnerable Afghans, including human rights activists, politicians, journalists, and others who fear that they could be in the crosshairs for their work in the country over the last 2 decades, are also worried. Female journalists and politicians who've been outspoken against the Taliban have been fanatically deleting online traces of themselves and trying to stay out of sight and out of mind. Thousands have been exposed to the threats of violence and violent retaliation. We learned on Monday that a Canadian C-17 took 436 people at a Kabul airport on Sunday night, up from the 121 airlifted the day before. I think we've heard that the U.S. have done about 16,000. The plane carried Canadian citizens and family members, as well as Afghan nationals who had been approved for resettlement by Canada and its allies. We're hearing that we're going to bring 25,000. Very little detail on how that's going to work, because if they're not outside the country, they're not refugees. And as Saboor pointed out, even for us as sponsorship agreement holders, as church, how do we reach those people? How do the groups of fives reach those people? So there's a lot of details. It's an election time. It's a great time for us folks to be asking questions of the people on our doorsteps about that. For all three of you, I guess, Is it enough? Are we doing enough here in Canada to get these folks to safety and to do what we can to help bring people who will be contributing? And Mike mentioned this earlier when he talked about people who come here and become Canadians, people like Saboor and like Tayiba, who are incredible Canadian citizens doing incredible work here. Are we doing enough to bring folks here? Perhaps I can start with you, Saboor, and we'll go around the panel.
Sure. I, first of all, would like to reassure the Canadian people that Afghan people are very hardworking and committed individuals.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of Afghans, obviously, as I'm originally from Afghan, and I don't know a single one that isn't working tirelessly to give back to society here in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
I think as much as this would be a gift, whoever is able to come to Canada and escape the difficult situation in Afghanistan, it is a gift to Canada as well. Like many of us who are immigrants and came to Canada and established ourselves. And the second thing that I would say is there's two areas, obviously, as Canada, we can really help out. First of all, with respect to the people that are trying to find a new home, we need to make this process a little simpler and a little more clear. The government has announced a big number, but like, how is that going to work? The details are not very clear. Their criteria currently is very strict, and so we're not even sure if people are going to be able to take advantage of that. And then there are certain other limitations, like the requirement to have a UN refugee certificate if you want to come from certain countries. That makes it very difficult as well. So I think we can continue to raise our voices with our MPs and other authority that this process needs to be improved. The second aspect that I think I want to raise is that yes, this has happened, but we need to own it. We need to understand that we just can't wash our hands and done, like the last time after the Soviets left Afghanistan. When the Western countries left, it was extreme poverty and just perpetual hardship upon people that facilitated the environment that bred people of Al-Qaeda there, and then the Taliban and their extreme ideology and approach to governance. I think if we maintain some sort of a positive engagement with Afghans, even be it the Taliban government, we will be able to hold them accountable. We will be able to hold them responsible. Of course, we know the grave concerns we have with respect to human rights, abuses from the past, women's rights abuses from the past that the Taliban have, and potentially harboring terrorists and such organizations. And so we need to maintain a certain level of pressure. We need to have some NGOs. We need to maintain some goodwill to the people of Afghan. We can't just sanction and make it a big, huge prison. Like, Kevin, you and I were talking about Gaza and how that's like a prison, I don't think people are going to have good feeling about Western countries and countries like Canada. We cannot abandon the Afghan people. We have to maintain some sort of a positive, continued pressure on the government and support relief, humanitarian approach to the people of Afghanistan.
Yes, thank you. Tayiba?
Well, it's the thing is that it's, as Saboor mentioned, the procedures of bringing the 20,000 Afghans to Canada is not very clear at all. So I get a lot of emails and messages. And please, how can we do? What's the procedures? How can we apply? What can we do? So this is not really clear. It has to be really clear. And also, we sponsored my brother-in-law. He is in Tajikistan. He escaped Taliban 2 years ago. He went to Tajikistan, and we applied as a group of 5 through a church. And it has been like 8-9 months. We haven't even heard anything from the immigration about giving a file number or acknowledging that they received the package, the forms and everything. So nothing. So the immigration system is really, really slow and not clear. That has to be improved. And also humanitarian assistance, Afghanistan really, really need it right now at this moment. And that's really important. And also we can bring more than 20,000. We
have lots
we're a big country. We can afford that, so if they can increase the numbers, more people have opportunities to come, that would be great.
Tayiba, I have to agree with you. I'd have to say that, I'm getting feedback here somewhere. I have to agree with you and say that, I mean, not only can we need to, like it's, I just think about the response to Syria and what started out as 25,000 ballooned to 50. And I know even here in London, it ended up being 12 or 1,500 people. That actually assisted our community in so many ways, both the humanity of it and the economics of it. So there's all kinds of reasons for us to do this. Most importantly, of course, the humanitarian one. So let me go to Mike before we turn to Rob to wrap up.
Can I just ask something before Mike? Sorry, I'm jumping in here.
Yeah.
One thing that I remember from Syria, when winter came, a lot of people died in Syria, whether they were trying to or whatever it was. The countries that eventually did give support, they could have given support earlier. And that's something that I want to emphasize again, the urgency of the humanitarian situation.
Right.
That we can't abandon the Afghan people. We need to have the NGOs, on the ground still. That country has been, ravaged by war for decades.
Right.
And we need support for those people now than tomorrow when people are dying in mass numbers. Sorry, Mike, I took.
Okay, over to Mike's thunder now.
No, your thought process is absolutely outstanding. So I will sum up really quickly. Can Canada do more? Yes. Should we have done more? Yes. Should we have been at the table? Yes. Should we be sitting beside the US president and the British prime minister at all these discussions? Yes. We're a G7 country. If other countries won't do the right thing, then we have to be able to act on our own. We are an independent nation that works with allies. When your next door neighbor does not throw water on their house and lets it catch a blaze, you might throw water on theirs, but you also throw water on your own to keep your house from burning. So what can Canada do? We can eliminate, as these folks have said, a lot of the red tape in getting these people out. We also have to remember the impact that Afghanistan is having at home. We also have to remember the wounded soldiers, and I keep going, the families of the fallen. I attended only 2 Afghan veterans' funerals simply because you don't go to get together the funerals in country when you come home. Has the government, has anyone reached out to the parents? And I say for the most part to the parents of the soldiers who fell. Because before you were able to say, my child helped stabilize that country. He or she gave their life and that country is better now than they left it. I don't know what the families of the fallen are thinking right now. I don't know what they are feeling about other soldiers. And Canada's responsibility to the Afghan people is not just to the folks in Afghanistan. It is to every one of the 40,000 members that deployed there to help, to assist. Because as I said, I'm comfortable speaking with you now. I spoke to some of my friends who can't watch TV anymore,
right?
Because they still are dreaming and living about their tours. Things they did, things they didn't do, things that they saw. it has become, as that British soldier said, a pivotal part of my adult existence. So for me, my heart is tied to Afghanistan.
Yeah.
The friends that I have that came home who've been wounded, their hearts are tied to Afghanistan. My family, there's Afghanistan stuff throughout my house, whether it's pictures, whether it's challenge coins, whether it's little flags. I have the flag of Afghanistan tattooed on my body. As a Canadian soldier, I would never put another country's flag on my body, but I have Afghanistan tattooed on my shoulder. I will always have a part of me tied to my deployment. That is what senior leaders in all of these countries who didn't go, who didn't work for NGOs, who didn't fight, need to understand. There's a corner of your population who is irreparably tied to what goes on in Afghanistan. There's families who are irreparably tied. We've got it inscribed on our cenotaphs. We as Canadians have tied ourselves to this country. The government can do more. They can move faster. When it's time to get people out, you get people out. Fill out the paperwork later. Be cognizant of what you're doing. Get the folks that we promised help to out. And as was said before, prepare for a cold, long Afghan winter. And if it turns, and again, be prepared to speak, and I have a hard time saying this, be prepared to engage with any form of government to try to make it better, because you can't just close your eyes and say that country doesn't exist. You can't say, because I don't like the government, we're not going to engage in some talks. I watched on an American news channel some CIA director speaking to a former Taliban leader, and whether his or her stomach turned when they sat, they understand that this is where we're at right now. And platitudes and finger pointing and yelling and screaming are not going to do those folks on the ground any good. We fulfill what we have to do. We bring them here, we help them, we resettle them. And again, not in a paternalistic way. The folks that I met in Afghanistan, the Afghans that I had the ability to interact with, great people. We couldn't speak to each other. That's why I had the interpreter. We did a lot of laughing and a lot of pointing. But I'm telling you, our country gets stronger when we have people who want to be here and who want to contribute and who will contribute. Those are the folks that are going to be the next generation of leaders that we have, and are also going to be the people who remind us of our promises, responsibilities, and things that we as Canadians have done. At the end of the day, like I said, 158 fallen, 199 suicide. How are those families feeling? Those are the folks that we need to take care of, and we also need to take care of those people that supported us in country in Afghanistan.
I should say, Mike, and to thank you for coming on. I invited a couple of vets actually to come on, and I just want to highlight what you just said, which is not everybody is comfortable talking about what they went through there, I did have people that were connected to Catherine Ann and I. My wife is a reservist in the Navy, who said to me, "I can't do it, Kevin. I appreciate that you're doing it, but I can't talk about what I went through in Afghanistan." So, Mike, I appreciate you, because I know that it means reliving some horrific things, and thankful to our other guests as well. But let me turn it over to Rob.
Right. We've covered a lot today, and our time's coming to an end, but I do want to give everybody an opportunity for anything that perhaps we didn't cover that you wanted to get out to our listeners, anything that you really felt that you wanted to say that you didn't so far. I just want to give you that opportunity before we wrap up today. So Tayiba, anything that perhaps we missed, or anything you want to highlight again?
So I just want to say that I went to Afghanistan in 2000, in 2000, at the end of 2000. So that's when the Taliban were ruling. And I know what people are going through, because I stayed there for a couple of months. My mom was still alive and she was living there. And I know how people, at that time, people were scared. Schools were closed. Women who were educated, they could contribute to the community, to the government. They were just sitting home doing nothing, and I had to wear burqa, cover all over in order to go out, and I couldn't go out without a male relative with me. and I couldn't take pictures or videos when I was outside. The stores all of a sudden closed at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and the Taliban ordered all the stores should close so people can go and pray, even though some people didn't want to pray, or or weren't available or whatever. But that wasn't a freedom that people had if they want to practice religion or pray or not. They had to do it. So things like that. I understand what people are going through now.
Right. Thank you. Saboor, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Oh, where Saboor's on mute.
Yeah, I think maybe
There you go. Yep, there you go.
I have a few points that I want to sort of re-emphasize, and maybe one or two points that I have not discussed yet. The point that I would like to emphasize very much is that we cannot abandon the Afghan people. We need to continue. Yes, we're bringing some people here to safety and security, but that's going to be perhaps in the order of tens of thousands. Afghanistan has a population of 40 million people. And similarly, so I read somewhere that about 30,000 Afghans have been evacuated so far. I don't imagine they're going to evacuate more than perhaps all the Western countries, more than 100,000. So we need to think about the Afghan people who are going to be in Afghanistan. Winter is coming. There's a lot of hardships, and we need to kind of raise our voices about that too. And secondly, if the Taliban have come, we need to figure out a way to maintain pressure on them. They're making a lot of promises of upholding women's rights, allowing women to go back to work. I know some of my cousins, they are working, they continue to work even though they're women, and they're able to go to school. And so we hope that is maintained, and things don't change. We need to, I guess, continue to assess that. And secondly, having some level of engagement will allow us to have some levers over the Taliban. And having positive engagement or a working relationship with especially countries like Pakistan. Pakistan's a country which has the next largest population of the ethnic Pashtun group, which is a dominant group in Afghanistan. And in the past, they have hosted millions of refugees. And so supporting Pakistan in ways they can also support the humanitarian situation in Afghanistan is, I think, very important. And influencing them to make sure they're influencing a positive and stable government in Afghanistan is also an important part. So these are, I guess, my final thoughts of how things need to move forward. We need to think about the people in Afghanistan that are going to continue to live there just as much people who are able to leave. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike, final words.
Mine is, just as my two colleagues have said, is that when I think of Afghanistan, selfishly as a Canadian veteran, I also think of the Canadians that went there. Mm-hmm. So while we look on the TV, I want to remind everybody who's listening that somebody in your neighborhood, whether they are from Afghanistan, as my two co-hosts are, or whether they were somebody who put on the uniform, may be looking at the TV and be in the depths of despair, because it is difficult. This is a very difficult time. And what I say to my armed forces colleagues around the world is, we did our duty, we answered the call, and we did our best. You have nothing to be ashamed of. And please, please, please don't let what has transpired take away your pride in service. because it is hard to watch what's on TV, to recognize places that I've been to and see people. But it's also more difficult to sit with my colleagues that I've fought with, or my colleagues on the phone, who are suffering because most soldiers say, I wish I could have done more. And the fact that we can't go back, and the fact that we'd all pack up and go to retake the territory we did. I've spoken with a lot of guys who said we should form an old guys platoon and all go back. It's in some people's case, the pivotal point of their lives. It was not a waste. It was not for naught. And to be proud of what you've been able to do. When the folks from Afghanistan get here, I hope that the Canadian people welcome them with open arms, show them why we are unique, rebuild the trust that if we've lost or we may have given away, and explain to them that at the baseline level, at my house level, they're always welcome.
Rob, may I say one more thing I forgot to say?
Certainly.
I speak to a lot of Afghans who live in Afghanistan and have interacted with whether they're armed Canadian forces or whether they're civilian Canadian personnel. And people always tell me that the Canadian personnel are the people that they have the most respect for, because they in turn have the most respect for them and are able to understand their humanitarian plight. When they look and they wish for a place to be of these different countries that they have worked with, Canada is sort of their first choice. And that makes me so proud to be a Canadian. So proud that I have people like Michael as fellow citizens. And we can never thank them enough for the sacrifices they've made.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Well, these are such important conversations to have, and we are so thankful and honored that you came into our little corner of the podcasting world for an hour or so to talk to us and be honest and forthright and open our eyes. And I know our listeners will be moved and changed by what they've heard today. And I hope our listeners, as you've been tuned in today, will continue these conversations wherever you are, and keep the people of Afghanistan in your prayers. And we will certainly be doing that and moving forward together. And taking care of our brothers and sisters. So thanks to all of you for your time, and thanks to our listeners for tuning in today as we kick off season 5 of the Vicar's Crossing. And again, thanks to Tayiba and to Saboor and to Mike for their time and that important conversation. And that's a great way to kick off our 5th season of the Vicar's Crossing podcast, guys. So it's good to get back together again and do it this way. And I know there's some other shows coming up in the next few weeks. So I think Kevin wanted to highlight some of those guests.
Boy, it's been an exciting summer because we took those few weeks off. And when I came back to sort of thinking about this, I was really blown away by the publishers that have been reaching out to us. So I want to say, if you're a publisher out there and for whatever strange reason you're listening to this podcast, we're happy to hear from you about your authors. But we have 4 book release specials coming up this season, folks, at the beginning of this season already. But just to highlight the next few weeks here, we're going to be talking to the Reverend Jen Butler, whose book is Who Stole My Bible, which is really quite good. Shonda Prescott Weinstein, who is a physicist, an activist, a professor, a theoretical physicist, I should say. Drew Jackson has a book coming out called God Speaks Through the Womb, and is a great book. We've got Daniel Bowman Jr. coming up, and a guest host with us, Elsbeth Dobman, to talk about autism. Randall Balmer, referred to us by John Collins, our last guest, the historian. Remember the Irish professor we had on? Kate Bowler, who's releasing a new book here called No Cure for Being Human, and we're gonna be doing a book release with her. Philip Yancey, does it get bigger than Philip Yancey? I mean,
yeah,
Philip,
we were one of my favorite books. What's So Amazing About Grace?
But Grace, yeah.
Yeah,
So
I love that. Yeah.
out of the blue, I get an email saying Philip Yancey is writing a memoir and he'd like to come on your podcast to talk about it.
Yeah.
I got a tingle.
That's
I got a
great.
tingle when I
Good.
heard that.
Another tingle.
I get so many tingles. We got Peter Enns. We have our friend Michael Corrin. We got
Michael's
all
back.
kinds of stuff
Oh.
coming up. So just
That's
stick with us all throughout, folks. You won't be disappointed. Let's put it that way.
All right, good. We'll look forward to that. Again, thanks to our sponsors, to A. Miller George Funeral Home, where each life is celebrated, and their sister company, Cremation London Middlesex, both family owned and operated. Our thanks to Hyde Park Care Pharmacy, locally owned, locally operated, locally loved, and to Molly Maid. Remember to make your home a healthy haven. Call Molly Maid London today. So that's episode 1, season 5 of the Vickers Crossing podcast. I'm Rob Henderson from Holy Trinity St. Stephen's.
Kevin George here from St. Aidan's Church.
My name is Ian. Thank you for listening.
All right, guys. And hey, Kevin, remember, my friend, to always look both ways
Before you cross the street.
Thank you for listening. Our hosts are Kevin George and Rob Henderson. Our producer and composer is myself, Ian, with original artwork done by Elizabeth Dodman. If you have any questions or want to know where to find us, tweet us at Vickers Crossing or find us on Facebook at The Vickers Crossing. If you have any other questions about anything heard on this podcast, leave us a comment or look in the description to find out more. Thanks!